All right, part 5, chapter 6, Canada's Navy. So before we dive into Canada's Navy, a little bit of a review from part 1, the imperialist and nationalist. So if you're an imperialist, you're like a stormtrooper. You are loyal to the empire. Which empire is that? The British Empire. And so the British Empire, one of its subjects or colonies that they still considered was Canada. Even though Canada was officially its own independent country, we were still very tightly linked to the British Empire. And so an imperialist was very loyal to the British Empire, had a lot of connections with them. And they were also usually, by coincidence, of British descent. A nationalist, on the other hand, didn't really want a lot of strong ties between the British Empire and Canada. They kind of wanted Canada to be its own country and its own independence by itself. And so in that regards, they didn't want a lot of influence, a lot of connections with the British Empire. And coincidentally, many nationalists were of French descent or Francophones. Coincidence? So now that we look at the Canada's Navy, what was going on around this time? Well, Canada was still a growing country, so they didn't have a lot of soldiers or military force. At that time, the HMS Dreadnought, this was a British ship, was the biggest warship built so far. The HMS Dreadnought was a Dreadnought class ship, meaning it was the biggest and strongest out of all of them. So you would have like a little pontoon boat, then you would have, let's say, more of a sailboat, then you would have, let's say, a destroyer, a cruiser, a battleship, and then Dreadnought would be the top of them. And when the British built this, it sparked an arms race. All the other countries thought, whoa, the British has this big gun on the water, well, we want our own as well. And so every country, every empire started building their own warships, and this is why it was called an arms race. Because of this, Britain asked for help from its colonies. They said, well, please help us with this arms race. And Canada, being one of them, went and was faced with this question. Well, Prime Minister Wilfrid Laurier, same thing with the Boer War, was between a rock and Iraq. Imperialists wanted to support Britain and help build ships. Nationalists didn't want to build any ships for Britain, but wanted ships for Canada. And once again, Wilfrid had his famous compromise. He buys 2 old ships from the British. And these 2 old British ships become Canada's Navy. And neither side is happy. They're actually become quite furious because the nationalists see this as a total waste of resources, and same thing with the imperialists. They said, well, what is 2 old ships going to do to help Britain? And so eventually these 2 sides were very displeased, and this actually led to Sir Wilfrid Laurier's ousting, meaning he was eventually elected out of office. He lost his job as Prime Minister. And this was the Naval's arms race. And here's a picture of the HMS Dreadnought. Had a lot of guns, a lot of armor, and it was a force to be reckoned with.